Hello everyone. Tonight, we descend into the lonely, windswept world of lighthouses, those isolated towers that stand as guardians of the sea, warning ships away from jagged rocks and violent currents. But behind the light of safety, behind the walls built to protect sailors, lie stories that are anything but safe. Lighthouses, cut off from the world, battered by storms, and haunted by tragedy, often become the perfect prisons of horror. What happens when men are left alone for months, with nothing but the roar of the ocean and the darkness pressing in? What secrets echo through the spirals of these towers, where footsteps are heard even when no one is there? Tonight, I bring you 3 disturbing, true lighthouse horror stories that will chill you to the bone. These are not legends created for entertainment. These are events that left scars on history itself. So dim your lights, listen closely, and enter the silence of the sea. If you dare, our first story takes us back to the early 1800s on a rocky outpost off the coast of Wales. It was called the Smalls Lighthouse, and at first glance, it was nothing more than a wooden tower planted on a desolate reef. Its purpose was simple: guide ships away from the rocks. But for 2 men who kept the light burning there, it would become a coffin. 2 keepers, Thomas Howell and Thomas Griffith, were stationed at the lighthouse. Isolated, weeks on end, they spent their days maintaining the lamp, repairing the wooden beams, and fishing off the rocks when the weather was calm. But when storms raged, they were prisoners. The lighthouse, battered by waves, swayed and groaned with every crash of water. For weeks, sometimes months, relief could not come. And in those lonely days, something happened between the 2 Thomases. Some accounts say they argued constantly. Others say one was cruel, while the other, sickly and weak, could barely endure the punishment of the sea. Whatever the case, one stormy night, tragedy struck. Griffith fell ill, or perhaps, as rumors whispered, there was foul play, and he died inside the lighthouse, but Howell was trapped with the body. Terrified that people would think he had murdered his partner, Howell did not dare to throw the body into the sea. He built a crude coffin from spare wood and placed Griffith's remains inside, but the storms did not stop. The waves beat against the lighthouse so violently that the coffin itself broke apart, and Griffith's body was exposed to the elements, decomposing before Howell's eyes. Days turned into weeks, and Howell was forced to live with the rotting corpse of his companion. Some say he tied the remains outside on the balcony, fastening the hands with rope so they wouldn't blow away. But the wind, the storm, and the sea conspired to torment him further. The body's arm came loose, and as the winds howled, it waved endlessly through the window, as if Griffith himself mocked his surviving partner. For weeks, Howell was trapped in this nightmare alone, haunted by the sight and the stench, with the ocean outside and a corpse for company inside. By the time rescue finally came, Howell was broken, unrecognizable. His hair had turned white, his eyes hollow, and his mind shattered. He never recovered from the horror he endured in that tower. This gruesome ordeal was so shocking that it changed British law forever. From then on, lighthouses would always be manned by 3 keepers instead of 2, so that no man would ever again be left alone in such a terrible situation. But the Smalls Lighthouse has never been forgotten. Even today, sailors claim that on stormy nights they can see a figure on the balcony waving endlessly as if the dead Griffith still signals from beyond the grave. Our second story brings us to the shores of Florida, to one of the most famous and haunted lighthouses in America, the St. Augustine Lighthouse, built in the 1800s, it was a beacon of safety for sailors approaching the treacherous coast. But behind its spiral staircase and towering lantern, the St. Augustine Lighthouse hides a tragic and terrifying history. In the 1870s, during construction of the lighthouse, a terrible accident occurred. The lighthouse keeper at the time had children who often played around the site. One summer afternoon, his 2 young daughters climbed into a small cart used by workers to carry supplies down a rail track that led toward the sea. The cart rolled, gaining speed, and before anyone could stop it, the girls were thrown into the water. They screamed, but the waves swallowed them before help could arrive. By the time workers reached the site, it was too late. The children had drowned. Their deaths marked the beginning of the St. Augustine Lighthouse's reputation as a place of sorrow and spirits. Over the decades, countless visitors, keepers, and tourists reported eerie encounters. People climbing the tower heard the sound of giggling children, only to turn and find no one there. Some reported seeing small shadows darting around corners, or the sound of tiny feet running up the staircase, pattering just ahead of them. Many have claimed to see the apparition of a little girl, in period clothing, standing at the edge of the staircase, watching silently before vanishing into thin air. Others report being pulled, tugged, or even shoved while climbing the spiral stairs, as if invisible hands play tricks on them. Paranormal investigators who spent nights in the lighthouse captured chilling evidence: disembodied voices of children calling out, heavy footsteps in the keeper's quarters, and even the shadow of a man, believed to be a former keeper who hanged himself in despair within the tower. One visitor described walking up the spiral stairs at night. Halfway up, she heard a whisper right in her ear, "Don't fall." When she turned, she was alone, but moments later, she felt a sharp tug on her dress that nearly pulled her backward. Terrified, she fled. Even in broad daylight, the lighthouse holds its eerie power. Tourists often faint inside the tower, overwhelmed by sudden dizziness, as if something unseen presses on their chests. Staff members report the sound of boots pacing across empty rooms, and late at night, when the lantern is still, the keeper's house echoes with laughter that should no longer exist. The St. Augustine Lighthouse is now considered one of the most haunted places in America, a reminder that tragedy leaves behind echoes that refuse to fade. Our final story takes us to the most chilling of all, the infamous mystery of Eilean Mor, a lonely island in Scotland's Flannan Isles. It was December 1900 when a supply ship approached the lighthouse after weeks of stormy weather, but something was wrong. The lighthouse, normally shining its guiding beam, was dark. When the relief crew landed, they expected to find the keepers waiting. Instead, the island was silent. Inside the lighthouse, the clock had stopped. Meals were left unfinished on the table, as if the men had left in a hurry. Oilskins, heavy coats meant for protection from the rain, were missing. Yet one coat still hung by the door. The logs revealed strange entries. One of the keepers had written of terrible storms, of fear unlike anything they had felt before. But the weather reports for that time showed no such storm. Days later, the log mentioned one of the men crying in terror and another praying. The final entry read only, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." After that, nothing. The 3 keepers were gone. No bodies were ever found. Theories spread like wildfire. Some believed a giant wave swept the men away as they worked near the cliffs. Others whispered of madness, of one keeper killing the others before throwing himself into the sea. More sinister still were the legends that something from the sea, some ancient presence, had come for them in the night. Fishermen told stories of seeing glowing lights circling the lighthouse in the days before the disappearance, of strange shapes moving through the mist. Even now, the Flannan Isles mystery is unsolved. But sailors passing by at night swear the light sometimes flickers back to life, though the tower has been automated for decades. They claim to see figures moving in the lantern room, keeping watch even when no one is supposed to be there. Some have heard voices carried on the wind, calling out in Gaelic, though the island remains empty. The story of Eilean Mor stands as one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history, a chilling reminder of how the sea can take what it wants and never give it back. And so, from Wales to Florida, from Scotland's lonely cliffs to America's haunted coast, lighthouses remind us that isolation breeds shadows. They stand tall against the waves, but inside their walls are stories of madness, tragedy, and spirits that never rest. When you next see a lighthouse shining in the distance, ask yourself, who is tending that light? Is it a living man or a ghost forever bound to the tower? Thank you for watching Shdows Secrit. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying stories from the shadows.